people are Lucy Lowe, Becky Watson, and Laura Wilson, who were all killed by grooming gangs. They should be household names. Everyone should know their names. George Floyd is a household name.
Mm-hmm.
These 3 white British girls who were killed because they were white by the grooming gangs, I even have to look them up.
Right. And the media does very, very little actually in reporting on that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a friend of mine a few years ago started doing a book on the so-called grooming gangs the rape gangs in Britain. And he actually didn't get around to writing it. He said it was just, the whole thing was too depressing.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing he did say to me, which I was very struck by, was he said he thought when he went around interviewing the victims, the thousands of victims of these gangs, of mainly Muslim men, he was struck that he thought that the people who were interviewing, the victims, would be kind of talked out.
Mm-hmm.
Far from it. Nobody had talked to them.
Mm.
The media had never knocked on their door.
So look, this is why I'm pessimistic. The policing, the media, the politicians are going to you saying, I don't know what to do about it. All the institutions of Britain are hapless.
Yes.
So I'm very pessimistic about where this is going.
Well, one of the things that people quite often think is there'll be a kind of wake-up moment where people realize, actually, it can't go on.
What on earth is that going to look like? If
Right.
October 7th wasn't a wake-up moment, if Manchester Arena wasn't a wake-up moment,
Right.
with all these girls being killed isn't a wake-up moment, what on earth is it going to take?
Well, here's what people do. I mean, I thought there were lots of times I thought, maybe this is it. And then I started to think, actually, this won't be it. This won't work.
Yeah.
I thought a British soldier being beheaded on the streets of London would make some impact. Nope. I thought David Amis being killed by a jihadist would have an impact. Look at the debate that his colleagues did, the session in which Parliament reconvened to pay tribute to their fallen colleague. It was as if David Amis had died of a heart attack from natural causes. None of them. Some of them talked about the online harms bill because they said things like, people write mean things about us MPs. Okay, well, people write mean things about everyone.
Yeah.
I'm not downplaying the threat to MPs, but there's a lot of hate online. But they were talking about the online harms bill. David Amis wasn't killed by the online harms bill. He was killed by a guy who had also stalked out Michael Gove's house to try to assassinate him and to murder him. And this young man, was it Ali Harbi Ali? I thought, what a disservice, what a deep disservice to your colleague that you would not acknowledge the reason he was killed. And by the way, when Joe Cox was murdered in equally brutal circumstances, it wasn't the case that the House didn't want to identify the killer or what might have motivated the killer. In fact, as I well remember in 2016, there was a period where almost everyone who was voting for Brexit was being accused of being complicit in the murder of Joe Cox. If somebody said, for instance, every Muslim in Britain is complicit in the murder of David Amis, you would have howling. And by the way, I think it would be wrong. Of course they're not. But they couldn't even identify the strand of ideology that had led to the murder of their colleague. And that's MPs. These are elected representatives. And this is one of their own, killed in the most brutal fashion by somebody who then sits by the body proudly. And they don't have the guts. They don't have the... And what is that? Cowardice. Cowardice and a total inability to think of how to address the problem. Because David Amis was not killed by a one-off crank. He was killed by somebody who has an ideology which is rampant across the West, which is rampant in the region we're in, which is covering the Gaza and the West Bank and much of the Muslim world. So it's not, and as I say, apart from cowardice, then it's a thing of, why don't you recognize this? And we then would come back to that same thing, which is, what are you going to do about it? And there have been times when there was one time when I thought it might shift in Europe. And that was the days after the Bataclan. Again, when people say, "Well, how would you react to the Nova Festival in Europe?" I say, "The Bataclan was the closest we've had." And there was a moment then. I remember Jean-Claude Juncker and Angela Merkel went very quiet for about 3 days because they were waiting to see if the attackers had come from the recent migration from the Middle East and North Africa. And if they had have done, I think there would have been serious consequences in Europe and against them politically for sure. But they just managed to survive it by the fact that the terrorists on that occasion were Belgian and French born. They had come for training in Syria and slipped back into Europe through the migrant routes. But they just, the train just missed some of the European politicians. But still, by the way, in France, the discussion on what we're talking about here is much more advanced than it is in Britain.
Where is it at in France?
Oh, well, I mean,
So the interviewers bring up a subject now, the 3 girls in England, in London, that were killed by these Muslim groomer gangs that are majority from the Indo-Pak area. There are some Middle Easterners involved inside there as well, Pakistani Indians, Middle Easterners, other Asians. But for the most part, it seems to be coming from the ethnicity of most of these groomer gangs are, coming from the Pakistani side, whether they're British born or they're immigrants or illegals, that are there, who knows? But regardless, it doesn't really freaking matter. And what the interviewer brought up to Douglas was that these 3 girls, he had to look up the names because it didn't make the name story of the day over there. Somehow it was being suppressed. And again, through the government, even telling these private institutions and other news media sources, probably, hey, keep it out. Because when this thing was going on, they weren't even, when this whole grooming thing basically came out, and some newspapers did run with the stories, and there have been some convictions, so don't get me wrong, there have been, but the outcry has not been like it should have been. There are thousands of girls that were done. The majority of them happen to be Muslim girls, young, enticed. Also, girls, white British girls as well. So it's been a mix. But like you said, like Douglas was saying, nobody visited. I mean, nobody from the news came out to check out the stories to ask, what happened. It's not that they were trying to, these families were trying to suppress what happened in terms of the victim side. No, they wanted to tell the stories, but nobody came to them. I mean, these people should have somehow coalesced. I don't know how they would have done that, but to come together and go to the steps of Parliament, to go to, Downing Street, to go to 10 Street, whatever that is. I mean, it's just so, when you think about this, and then George Floyd, his name is known around the world, that piece of shit, that piece of crap, that evil, disgusting, vile, rotten human being. I hope he is roasting and toasting in HE double hockey sticks. That he is roasting and absolutely burning away there. Because this person, the things that he did, and to be elevated to the status of literally sainthood on the American social scene by the left, by the progressives, by the liberals, by the Democrats, to have 3 or 4 funerals during the whole COVID thing, and then on top of that, his family getting millions of dollars in restitution for what? Yes, okay, the police officer was involved in, I guess, some of the surroundings around, in his death. What he did was, shouldn't have been done, obviously. But the fact of the matter that this person didn't bring that about on himself in the first place, Just look at the history of this guy, George Floyd, holding a knife to the abdomen of a woman who's pregnant. I think his girlfriend at the time, when the police were coming after him, saying that he threatened he would do something to harm her and the baby with a knife to the belly. This is the kind of person, a drug dealer, selling drugs to children, responsible for how many deaths just from his drug trade, let alone how many deaths he caused himself by killings and murderings himself. And this is the person that the left is willing to die upon the hill for, on a pedestal to him? Amazing, folks. Absolutely amazing. Anyway, this is what we have on tap for you today, folks. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective of what happens when you get Douglas Murray on an interview talking about social media, these grooming gangs, culture, politics, religion, immigration, integration, assimilation. They all come crashing together. Let's get back to more of the interview right now.
Everything I say. And I mean, they all know there's a problem, because how could you not? They don't all know what the solutions are, and they don't all suggest very many solutions, but they all know there's a serious problem. I don't think the British authorities do.
Mm-hmm. There's another, as well as the media and politicians, there's a civil service, and you've just been you've been brought into a big story about the civil service. There's been a whistleblower named Anna Stanley, and this is pretty rare because civil service are under NDAs, so they can't speak out. She's come out, and she was made to do some sort of counter-terror training at King's College
in London,
in which not only are we told that she heard conversations where people thought the Prevent program was Islamophobic, but also your name came up along with your friend Joe Rogan.
Yes.
It seems to me that the civil service is another, call it the blob. In America, they've got their version of it, the deep state. How concerned about the civil service are you? Do you think that this is another sort of thing that needs to be taken apart?
I mean, it just needs...
Well, folks, so far this has just been a very well-conducted interview. I love this guy here, Winston. The questions that he's asking, very probing, really getting into some in-depth stuff. The question that he asks is, what's it going to take to make the British public turn around, to make any public turn around? That's a question we ask here on the other side of the pond, folks, here in the United States of America. What's it going to take to wake people up from this wokeness that's occurring? And slowly but surely, there are little things that are happening. I mean, George Floyd was that one thing when it just swung to the side. Black Lives Movement swung to one side big time. It looked like they were getting, all the attention was going to their side. Everybody was scared to talk about it. It was right after the Me Too thing was sort of, piggybacked, the George Floyd piggybacked onto that. And it looked like for a longest period of time that people were so afraid to talk out, to say anything at all, for fear of, the racist card, the bigot card, the homophobe card, every political playing deck card that the left utilizes, insurrections, all those cards are being thrown on the table. And it looked for a while that, wow, what the hell are we going to do? And then, as always, this stuff starts to unravel. The Black Lives Movement started to unravel. Where's the money going to? 90, 100, 130, 140, $50 million. Where's it going to? Oh, you're buying houses for you and your family and friends. All this stuff. It's not going to communities. People didn't see any of that money. The George Floyd, sainthood story, that starts to unravel a little bit. And all of a sudden, he's not that same level as before. So those start to unravel. The wokeness starts to unravel a little bit. DEI, which should be DIE. DEI has gone to die. Wokeness causes brokenness. Companies starting to go in that direction and then finding out that all of a sudden their bottom line is being affected and they can't stop the bleeding. The money is it's just not coming in. What happened, with Bud Light hiring a male transgender, a biological male, to play a woman on a beer commercial. Oh, disastrous. So what does it take to wake up? I think there's a lot of things that happen Right now, look at what's happening with the immigration problem here in the United States. People are waking up. So there are things that happen. It comes slowly, it comes inch by inch, but we're regaining the foothold on the beach. And there's some stability right now. We're just waiting for the reserves. They're coming too, but they're coming in slow, but they're coming in anyways, folks. We appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Sheikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to subscribe to that channel, like, share, and follow. Y'all know what to do. Come on. It's just hitting the button, folks. And if we bring some valuable content, let us know. Share your thoughts. Our other videos are linked here and below. Just a few of them. My final thought is always, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.